Welcome to my Bob Thurman Podcast. I'm so grateful some good friends enabled me to present them to you. If you enjoy them and find them useful, please think of becoming a member of Tibet House US to help preserve Tibetan culture. Tibet House is the Dalai Lama's cultural center in America. All best wishes. Have a great day.
This is episode 241, a conversation with Dr. Mark Epstein.
Okay. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Bob.
How are you?
Just fine.
So nice to see you. Now, I'm very happy to have you visit in the podcast today. And I'm very excited. We just did some workshop together, but you started to talk about what you're writing now and what you're thinking and doing. And so that's really what I want to get after. But of course, I'm amenable to whatever you want also. So that's what I'm really excited about. Like what because you always, last one was advice not given.
Yeah,
And,
a guide to getting over
how to
yourself.
get over yourself. So we're all over ourselves now because we read that book.
Yeah.
So what are we going to get over now? What are we going to do?
Okay, I'll tell you about the book I'm writing, but it's in process, so you have to realize
But you don't
this
have
is.
to. You can just
No, I want to. I want to.
Oh,
I
okay,
haven't.
okay.
You would be the only person besides my editor that I would have talked to about this so
Right.
far. But my editor and my wife, and my patients. So you're,
Well, I don't
you're
want
part
to be
of an
blamed.
exclusive club.
I don't want to be
no,
blamed
no, no.
if telling me creates writer's block or something.
Yeah, I will. I'm always
Okay.
looking for someone to blame for writer's block.
Okay.
But, I won't put you at the top.
Okay.
I only write one day a week, so I actually have to let the tension build up, and then the one day I have, it gets discharged. So I actually rarely have writer's block. But I did have it when I finished that last book, Advice Not Given, A Guide to Getting Over Yourself. I didn't know what I was going to do in my writing day. So I set myself the task of trying to discover how I was really using my Buddhist background in the therapy office. And I decided every week or two I would try to capture what happened in a given session where I felt like some opening occurred, or I was channeling some Buddhist something, some understanding that maybe I had, maybe I didn't have, but I was using it in the therapy office. I decided over the course of a year, the task I set myself was to try to figure out how the Buddhist understanding, such that I have or don't have, was actually being used in the therapy office with my patients. Mm-hmm. Not in terms of teaching meditation to them, but in terms of what was I doing, what was motivating me to say or do whatever I was doing that had some kind of something in it that maybe was coming from the Buddhist side of my background. So for a year, every week or two, I would try to record in writing what happened in the session, and then I would type it up on my writing day. So over a year, I accumulated like a diary or a chronicle of therapy, and it ended by chance just before the COVID virus hit, and I stopped being able to do face-to-face psychotherapy. So it was all through 2019. That I did this. But I couldn't bear to even read it over until I was done. I didn't really know what I had, but after the year, I started to go through it, and I thought, oh, this is actually sort of interesting.
I'm sure it's really interesting.
And so that's the kernel of this book that I'm working on. Then I've been going through each session and writing a kind of reflection after the description of the session, and then there's a couple of chapters that introduces it, and one chapter that's going to close it, and that'll be a book. And I think it might be called the Zen of therapy, uncovering a hidden kindness in life. Uncovering a hidden kindness in life.
Oh, that's very good. But you know, the thing is, if I can just interject, what occurred to me in talking to you yesterday, and occurs to me listening to this, is that since people are always worried when something is labeled Buddhist, because they think it means it's religious, if you make the point somehow, or maybe an introduction or preface, that Buddhist means to you this sort of higher level of observation of what's happening, rather than some sort of putting some preconceived idea on top of it. Connected to that, all that complex of things we got about from Cage, no preconceived idea, and the whole idea of transcending conceptuality. And it fits with that thing that Dan Brown, I think, mentioned, or Jack Engler, one of the other ones in the Vipassana world, where the Tekiskasov studies of people with thousands of hours of meditating, they can identify a flashed image like 50 times or 100 times faster than the ordinary person who hasn't meditated, because their observation is much finer. So, if you preface the thing, I don't know how you will explain it, in your own preface. But if you prefaced it that what you're used to mentioning as Buddhist, because it's sort of an atmosphere that comes to you from your many meditations, is actually this more fine observation of things.
That's interesting.
There's nothing religious about it.
You're referencing Dan Brown and the Tekistoscope. I was there with him in the basement of... Yeah, I was there with him in the basement of the Insight Meditation Society. When he was... Yeah, it was when I was doing my internship. And I had a month off from my internship, and I got it approved to do research.
It's so exciting, this
I
whole
know,
world
and I went to IMS and was sitting... but also going down to the basement with Dan Brown as he was doing this Tekistoscope experiment.
And he was doing it with the experienced meditators.
With the experienced meditators,
and it was real data, right? The speed.
Yeah, it was real data. That was his thing. Yeah,
right. That's amazing.
I know. Well, so far I'm reading all these Zen poems because there's something in the Zen poems that speaks to the the underlying reality beyond the conceptual adaptation that we all have to make, that I'm trying to get at in these sessions where there's some kind of movement.
Well, that's very appropriate, because the Zen thing, for example, it was taught in this country at first as not Buddhist, just Zen, just meditation.
Right.
And which was not quite accurate, but in a way, within Chinese Buddhism, where Chan starts, although I think it comes from Tantra in India, but in Sri Lanka, where they had Tantra in the day of when Bodhidharma lived there. But they say they're the school, because the Chinese Buddhist schools, religious schools, are identified by sutras complexes that they attach to, like Lotus Sutra, Avatamsaka Sutra, Pure Land Sutra, the three other big ones in Japan and China. But the Zen one, they always said, the great leaders of the Zen always said, we're the no sutra school.
Huh.
You know what I mean? We're the non-sutra school. But in a way, they were inspired by the sutra about no sutra, which is the transcendent wisdom one, the emptiness one. But in a way, it's the non-sutra sutra. So it's not really, the key is, I think it's very important in your professional context and your writerly context that this is reality observation rather than something religious superimposed. That's what I meant.
Well, I was reading about the koans, and that the original translation for koan was public case. They were public cases. So then I thought, my psychotherapy sessions that are so private are becoming public cases in the in the writing. I know.
Well, and not only that, but also the idea of the people being. Are you using Tom Cleary at all?
I'm using. I love Tom. You turned me on to Tom Cleary.
Blue Cliff Record is the best.
Yeah.
Well, I only mention that because sometimes people in the Zen world who have their roshis, he's like an independent, like a Pratyeka Buddha type.
Oh, interesting.
And yet his translations are the most amazing, and he intuits, because the cases in the Blue Cliff Record, which is Chinese, right, the Bian Lu, are colloquial Tang Dynasty and late Tang Dynasty language, and no scholars know what the colloquial people talk like. And so it's ungrammatical and it's like weird. And he kind of, he intuits it in a sort of modern, almost hipster thing kind of. And he gets it, and he really gets it. And he's not afraid of things like that are in it, you know. Like he says, like when Baijiang asks Huang Bo why he came to see him, Huang Bo says, well, I didn't come for anything else. But the else has no reference in the writing. Mm-hmm. So you have to think, what does else mean? Well, I'm looking at you. You know, he's looking at the teacher. So he says, there's nothing else. It's like, right here, looking at each other. You know, but somebody else would want to make it grammatical. So they would write, well, for anything else than to come and see you or something. Do you know what I mean? They'd add that. Scholars would. But he does not. So he conveys this thing. So you in the therapeutic situation, you know, that will have to be edited out.
Yeah, sorry.
You in the hold on. I have to get that thing out of the room. That's my fault.
No, come on. It's fine. But my email was turned on and it rang too, which I just shut it off.
So they are public cases. You're there face to face with people. Oh yeah, you're there face to face with people.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And it is mind to mind transmission sort of thing.
Oh, you know, something,
which is often verbal.
When you taught me in one of our times teaching together many years ago, I was already thinking about the original for me Zen koan, what is the sound of one hand clapping? But I had just been to the Japan Society where they had a big exhibit of Hakuin and his paintings, where they made a big point of saying, it was so beautiful. They made a big point of saying the original koan wasn't really what is the sound of one hand clapping, it's just that what is the sound of one hand. And Hakuin had a painting of a crouching monkey with his hands over his ears and a cuckoo flying with open beak in the background. And then under that he had done in calligraphy, what is the sound of one hand, as if the monkey just had to lift one hand in order to hear the sound of the cuckoo. And the sound of the cuckoo is prized in Japanese poetry because young lovers in the springtime go and sit outside together, waiting to hear the sound of the cuckoo. It's the only bird that sings with an open beak when it's flying, or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. So I was saying some version of this while we were teaching, and then you said, well, why does someone raise one hand? Because they're drowning and they're wanting to be saved, and the sound of one hand is also the reaching for Kuan Yin, she who hears our cries, for Avalokiteshvara, the benevolent bodhisattva reaching down to help us emerge from the mire of our own egocentric hands clutched over our ears, not hearing the sound of the cuckoo. So I tried to include all that right at the beginning.
That's wonderful. It's really, and so you have this all written, actually, really. It's a diary, and it's a matter of like editing, pulling together. Yeah. And it's I think it sounds like gems. It's gems. Because it's your caring intention, and I like the revealing hidden kindness thing.
Do you like that? That came to me late in the writing, but it seemed like maybe that was one of the points.
I think that's really awesome, because you do hide it, because you have to present a thing for people to echo off, to echo off. They can't feel that you're imposing something,
right?
Or they wouldn't bring out their own thing, I guess. That's really great. So when you said you're writing, that you only write one day a week?
Yeah.
Or one day.
One
Really?
day a week. Yeah, that's
You're
how
so
I've written
busy
everything.
with clients?
Yeah, the
with
other
patients?
days, clients and family. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I always wrote. I started writing because when I was first with Arlene, with my wife, who's a sculptor, when we were first together, I just assumed we would just be together all the time. You know, we were like in love, and I moved to New York to be with her. And then shortly after I got there, she's like, "Okay, I'm going to my studio now to work." And I was like, "What? You're leaving me to go to your studio? What am I supposed to do?" So that's when I actually started writing many years ago, and I sat at the dining room table and spread out my books and papers and started to write.
You went to the studio and wrote in the studio. You mean?
She went to the studio to make sculpture.
You weren't able to go.
I sat at the dining room table.
Yeah,
abandoned. No, in the apartment. In the apartment. I
was just like that. Nana and I actually we're still a bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
We are. I'm worse than her. You know, she's able to be cool. You know, but I still am a little bit like that.
Yeah, it was good for me. Yeah, I had to find my own voice. You know, I had to figure out what to do with myself when I was alone.
That's not my problem.
Instead of suffering.
Yes, right. And that has never been my problem. I always talk too much, you know. But I have to find. I want her to find her voice. Of course, I've always tried to do that. You know, she has dreams, you know, in which the Dalai Lama tells her you have to teach. And the old Yeshi Dhonden also used to come to her in dreams. She would tell me in the morning, "Oh, they told me I should go teach." No, but I'm not going to do that. You know. And then you go, you know. And then she would do that, you know. She taught me. Nana
taught me. At one point, I went to her when she was working at the Open Center, and we had one child, and we're getting ready to have a second child, and I was a little bit scared to have a second child, and I went to her, and she was very encouraging.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Nana was.
Yeah, when she's on her own, I guess she does that. Yes.
Yeah, she was like a therapist. She was like a therapist.
She teaches me. Actually, on my website. I just hope that nobody will be offended, but I have, you know, Yeshi Dhonden and Gelek Rimpoche and the Dalai Lama, but I'm going to put Nina on my website as a teacher.
Oh, that's good.
Because she is, you know. I did learn a lot from her.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
I am still, because I haven't learned enough, obviously. I haven't. I'm learning more, luckily. Okay, so that's it. So that you're doing that.
Yeah.
So then, after you finish that, what's the next book?
Hopefully,
or what more do you want to say about that? I'm nervous to make you say too much because
no, don't be you nervous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I am.
I'm trying. When we do those meditations, you know, of opening the Buddha field, and we imagine, we visualize the mentor figures. The Dalai Lama or the Bodhisattva or the people who have been kind to us in our lives, who have taught us, our therapists, our mothers, our lovers, our teachers. I always visualize these two grandfather figures of D.W. Winnicott, the child psychiatrist who originated the phrase of the good enough mother, and John Cage, the musician and composer, who channeled Buddhism into music. And so in the book, I'm trying to, whenever possible, when I write the reflections on the public cases, I try to use the wisdom that came through Winnicott and Cage. So I have little bit. It's a composition, you know, it's a collage, I would say.
It's amazing.
I'm trying to make a collage of all these people.
You know, I didn't really get enough into Cage, except from you. You know, so then, but you say, so the book you showed, what was the name of the book that I didn't actually study itself?
Silence. It's just called Silence.
It's a book called Silence.
Yeah, where he says there's no such thing as silence. You know, he was always finding the music, always finding the sounds, even in silence. Like he went to that whatever it's called, the anechoic chamber at Harvard, where it's like an isolation tank, but a scientific isolation tank where you're totally alone with no sound. But he heard two sounds even there, and like a
he did?
a hum and a high pitched something, and then
really?
the scientist said, "Oh, that's one was your blood." Well, he was hearing his own body. It was like his blood and his nervous system or something.
Well, that scientist would want to do that as a materialist, but actually that is a very profound tantric concept. What is that? Is anahata shabda.
Uh-huh.
And also non-Buddhist also tantra. It's called anahata, the unstruck sound.
Huh.
And it's preceded by, or it may be the same as, what they call the roar of emptiness. So there's like a roar and an unstruck sound.
Cage would have loved this. He would have loved
because when you're
this.
in the formless realm,
yeah.
If you look at the tantric Abhidharma, I tell you, they don't call it in Mahayana Abhidharma except for a couple of books. Some like Asanga wrote, the great Vasubandhu's brother, older brother, the great Asanga, he wrote Mahayana Abhidharma Samuchaya, a book like that. And but otherwise they don't use the word Abhidharma because all of the literature of all the Pandita Siddhas, who are scholars and adepts, who are the same people, in throughout all that huge 1,000-year-long university, they were doing Abhidharma in the tantric subtle body level, and I call it tantric neuroscience also, and it really is. It really, really is, and they just. The Westerners think, they didn't have the machines, they didn't. That's not true. They have the machine of the brain. It's like a supercomputer, and when you really can get where you can be with the brain, we have like a micro awareness. Then you can know what it's doing. Your mind connects to the brain because your mind is everywhere, And so the unstruck sound.
Yeah.
That's really...
Cage would have loved that, Bob.
He would have. He would also have loved Vimalakirti.
Yeah.
We'll find each other.
Yeah,
everything
good.
is small world. We've been going many lives. We're going more. We have to. We can't help it, And we just get in... What? Yeah.
I wrote my undergraduate thesis in the Department of Psychology and Social Relations at Harvard. I wrote it on the Abhidharma. I did. I wrote it on the inner science of the Abhidharma, where
that is so cool.
Did
you read Lama Govinda's book on that?
Yeah, of course. I read.
He was an excellent scholar.
Excellent scholar. I went. Yeah. I read Sherbatsky and Lama Govinda. And the Visuddhimagga. I went to the basement stacks of Widener Library and checked out all those books. No one had checked them out in like 30 years or something.
I know.
Daniel Goleman was my thesis advisor, and David McClellan was on my thesis committee. And
So you, by writing that, you're teaching them. Actually, you taught.
I was teaching myself.
He didn't know that.
No, Danny knew. Danny sort of.
No, but I'm saying. You were studying, but the point is, teachers always study themselves, and what people really learn from them when they're learning more, because they're modeling that, they're creating a field of that kind of learning. And a teacher who thinks they already know it all and just is like a parrot.
No,
you know what I mean? It's useless.
No, it was a really nice thing between us that Danny Goleman and I bonded that way. And the first article I ever wrote, I co-wrote with him for a journal that Ken Wilber was editing called Revision.
Really?
Yeah, Ken Wilber was living in Cambridge, and I went over and visited, and he published this paper about
That's
Abhidharma.
amazing.
Yeah, it was good. I was like 21 years old.
It's such a small world.
Yeah, very
incredible.
Small. Yeah. So Cage has been really important to me because he was into erasing the differences between meditation and music, and between sounds that are musical and sounds that are not musical. And I took that as inspiration for erasing the differences between meditation and therapy.
No, I'm just saying that's in your own life.
Yep.
To erase the distinction between meditating and being around the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
That happens. That's the Tsongkhapa has that in his. That's this mudra, this one.
What does it look like?
When you do the church and steeple, you have your yoga teacher does that, right?
I
do it
try
behind
to do
your
that.
back and stuff.
Yeah, it's so
you
hard.
can do that.
Yeah,
Well, and then you sort of, because you want to pull them apart, but the more you pull it apart, the tighter it becomes.
Yeah.
So one hand is meditating, one hand is just being around.
Yeah.
But you're doing that. That's what you're doing.
That's why you can never find the sound of one hand, because they're intertwined.
It's this unstruck sound is the sound of one hand.
Yeah.
It is. It's the sound of one hand. It is. Because and Tsongkhapa says some people, they can't bear the roar of emptiness, and they've run away from it. It frightens them. But and I'm sure that you hear that when you go into formless realm, past the four immeasurables, you go into the infinite space, consciousness, nothingness beyond awareness and unawareness type of thing, and that's the sound. That's the only sense you have left. The only way you can reach people in the formless realm. I only recently realized that from the tantric, from this text I'm working on, editing, retranslating, too much, but editing. It's written in the ordinary Abhidharma, I'm sure, but you have five senses in our realm, and then in the gods of the desire realm have only four, and then the form realm gods have only three, and then the highest one two, and then only one in the formless realm. And so then the bodhisattvas, the space womb bodhisattva, Akasha Garbhas bodhisattva, is the one who has to go in there, and I guess he can only get them by making noise. That must be Cage. Cage must be incarnation of Akasha Garbha bodhisattva.
Oh, that's good.
He must be, because he can only reach by where people who have tried to find total silence and remove themselves from all contact. That's the formless realm.
Yeah.
It's really meditational psychosis of the extreme kind, actually. Although it's good to be able to do it, because that's the one way there is no escape from relativity, from the embrace of the loving world.
Which level is the Tusita realm on?
What's that?
Which level is Tusita? Is the Tusita realm?
Oh, Tushita.
Yeah.
Tushita is the desire realm heaven. So therefore, actually, when they do the 12 deeds of Buddha, you so love the life of Buddha.
Yeah.
They always leave this one out. But the real technical 12 deeds of the Buddha is his descent from Akanishta, which is an area of the Brahma's highest heaven, the Brahma Shikin, what they call the crest Brahma. And there's an area there that even he doesn't really have access to, because it's kind of open to the formless infinite space. So it's the event horizon of infinity, or it might be perceived by a frightened person as a black hole, or it might be perceived as just losing yourself completely, like entropy, Maha entropy. But at that realm, that's where Buddhas create their Buddha verses, because they can shape anything out of anything. They have infinite. They're on the edge of the infinite energy, And so the first deed of the Buddha is not being conceived in the womb of Maya Devi. That's the second deed. The first deed is coming from that place to the desire realm, Tushita heaven, whence he can observe the planet rolling under him. Because there's a different time sense there, and he can perceive the genetics of the lineages where he desires to be reborn, to make the maximum impact as an example on other people. So he picks Maya and Shuddhodana, and in India there, etc. He didn't pick somebody in China or Germany or Egypt or Israel or Greece. He picked the foothills of Himalayas there in India. Because from there he could have maximum impact, because in that Tushita realm you have a body that is sort of humanoid, but it's divine, but it's not born in a womb there. It's born out of a lotus, just pop like that, but fully formed. But it is humanoid, like two arms, like supposedly, the Tushita. And there are other gods in that plane who are, running around, like being dilettantes, and not studying or nothing. But he has a Dharma center there called Manorama, fascinating to the mind. And Nagarjuna supposedly is there today, and Chandrakirti, etc. And when Tsongkhapa attained enlightenment, the morning he attained his full enlightenment, he dreamed he was there, and he was trying to go talk to them, but he couldn't. But then one of them came out and touched him with the Madhyamaka book. The Buddhapalita came out, actually, not Nagarjuna, but Buddhapalita, who wrote the first commentary on it, and touched him on the head. Then he woke up all happy, and then he realized something.
So in those pictures, in the sculptures of the life of the Buddha, where there's one where the Buddha's coming down a ladder with Indra on one side, right? Where's he? What's that from?
Well, that's later, because he promised his mother, who was living not in Tushita, in a lower heaven than Tushita. She lives usually in between giving birth to zillions of Buddhas and zillions of world systems. I mean, it's like serious gestation, Maya Devi. But she lives in Indra's heaven. They're called the heaven of 33. And she likes the infrastructure there or something, I guess. And, that's where they have the net of Indra, over it. That's their Facebook of that heaven, where it's all the jewels reflecting all the jewels. And so she lives there. And so he promised her, when he was doing his severe asceticism, and she thought he would die and was worried, or she purported to. Probably she really knew, but she purported to. And he said, don't worry, I'm going to get enlightened, I'm not going to die, and then I'm going to come and give you teaching. And then this will blow your mind. And then when he went up there, so one summer retreat, he went there instead of a rains retreat in some place with a roof, monsoon, He went up there, and then everybody was really, all the kings and all the students in India were really upset. They thought he would stay there, because, he wouldn't come back. So, but what he taught her there was Abhidharma.
Yeah, that's why I know
really?
it. Yeah, that's why.
Supposedly, I mean, she's already a Buddha, I guess. But anyway, they say in the more humanoid story that he taught her the Abhidharma.
Yeah,
and then there's another funny story, and that's even in Pali, which is supposed to be also humanoid and very naturalistic and none of this magic, but full of magic. But in the Pali's text, there's a situation where Buddha is teaching in the heaven of 33, and it's like Olympus, because it's on the cosmic mountain, it's not floating in like Tushita in the sky, it's on the cosmic mountain. And so Buddha's teaching there. So Indra is telling the other gods of that city, you guys better come and listen. Don't just party and mess around, You come and listen. Buddha's teaching. You don't get that chance. You go listen to it. And they're like, it's boring, Abhidharma. They don't want to do it. And then he threatens them, because he says, if you don't come, Brahma Shikin, the higher Brahma, he's going to come down here in the form of the youth with the 5 crests on his head, which I think is a kind of Manjushri simulation that very connects to Manjushri. So he's going to come there, he's going to, whip you into shape. Because you're just a desire realm guy, citizen of my city, but those higher form realm ones are very different. So he actually threatens them to come to the class.
That's what you have to do to study Abhidharma.
They don't associate it necessarily with the presence of the teacher for the mother.
Yeah.
That I've yet seen, but I bet that's the same time as teaching.
Yeah.
So then when he, at the end of the rains retreat, he comes down in Shankar, in that place called Shankar, and then for temporarily they see a ladder, like an escalator.
Yeah.
And in all those Asian empires, they have the triple staircase going into the palaces, and nobody is supposed to walk on the middle one. And that's because Buddha's on the middle one, and Brahma and Indra
are
on the right and left ones. Like, the other two who are there when he's born. Remember, they receive him from even in Pali, they're receiving him in my they're gods, but they come down into human form. they receive him when he leaves the left side of Maya. Or is it left side or right?
The left side, born of the left side. Yeah. I've made a lot out of that. The fact that his mother dies when he's a week old. I have written about that a lot, and you've heard me talk about it. Seeing that as a kind of
talk about it.
It's like for me, from the psychological side, it's like a placeholder for the kind of primitive agonies that in this life sometimes we experience the developmental traumas of growing up. Where from the Winnicott perspective, the parental environment is imperfect, not good enough. Either too intrusive or too abandoning, so that the child is forced out of that kind of primitive agony to construct a premature self, a caretaker self, a false self, a mental construct of a self, in order to manage the neglect, and that sort of inculcates a feeling of emptiness, not a good emptiness or a beneficent emptiness, but an absent, a kind of internalization of the absence, a presence that was absent. And so I always see that the Buddha's mother dying when he's a week old as kind of setting up. And I know we've talked about this in ways that you don't necessarily. You think that might be overdrawn, but setting... No,
I don't think it's overdrawn. I think because remember, his whole, even in the more magical way of looking at the way Mahayana does it, I like to look at it, it's meant to be completely human. So he's showing an example of someone who has a problem.
Yeah.
In other words, and who becomes a Buddha. There's a huge fuss about this, that they always say, by Buddha being completely human with problems and becoming a perfect Buddha, which is magical, that means we, with our human problems, can become this special sort of superhuman thing. Yeah. Because it is superhuman, ultimately, definitely. And I just had another dimension of that, by the way, which relates to some of the mean people in our society.
Yeah.
In that the father with the superego, if you speak in Freudian terms, covering over the emptiness with this pleasure garden routine and the male macho, and then he learns how to be a king and boss people around, and everybody flatters him, and he has all this harem, so he kind of gets into that, and then that's why maybe when he realizes the emptiness of the ordinary life and leaves the palace, he then overdoes the other side, punishing himself. He's punishing himself for having been a kind of machismo, lover boy, whatever, or then Big Daddy, himself as a husband, and so the complex of the machismo person covering over that emptiness.
Yes, exactly.
That's also there.
Yeah,
building a big palace, a huge palace that he builds.
Yeah.
And you're right that, and he's showing, maybe you could also say she's teaching by leaving instead of the joking thing of like she doesn't like the infrastructure on you anymore. Mm-hmm. But also she's teaching that you have to, the mother is going to be elusive if you just be ordinary, and you have to work to find it.
Yeah.
And by leaving and creating that problem, maybe if she's so magical that she can give birth out of her left side without an incision, then she's also showing that it's hard to be such a good mother, and this guy's going to have to cope with it.
Yeah. Well, that's
the only thing. The extended family makes it a little less traumatic than in the nuclear family. That's the only point I make.
Yeah.
Because sister's right there,
Well, the thing that happened with me as I was writing this book, and I think a lot about the primitive agony and the grievances that we have to our families of origin, and then the cultivation of recognition of the mother in everyone, and that sense of gratitude that is inculcated in many of the practices that we do. But I started to hear from a lot of my patients who are in their 40s or 50s or 60s with aging parents, many of whom had been big disappointments, gamblers or alcoholics or narcissists or all kinds of neglect.
Sure.
But all of these people, the children who have been in therapy trying to work out the problems in their own personal histories, on their own, they're reaching out to their aging parents, to take care of them in one way or another, and not because I'm encouraging it, and not because of anything directly in the therapy, and I think it's it's a very common thing, that the underlying kindness it rises up to assert itself.
Absolutely.
And that movement from grievance to gratitude, I've been thinking is one that, with Buddhism and therapy trying to work together now, like it's encouraging that.
Yes. Well, you're doing it.
Well,
it's so valuable. I'm so overwhelmed by it. Seriously, if I had the ear of George Soros or Leon Botker,
Botstein,
Botstein, that's right. He likes to conduct music, which is really nice.
Yeah.
He's a conductor, right?
Yeah.
And I met him once at a party, but we didn't have, because he's a strong fundraiser.
Yeah, that's their main thing.
That's his job. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think. The $1 billion that Soros wants to make a new kind of university, he has channeling it, I think, through Bard, or it's associated with Bard. I don't know. I had a lunch. I have a rain check on a lunch invitation from George Soros, but I don't know how to claim it. I've lost all coordinates because I really like to tell him. It's like building the new Nalanda in India. And then Amartya Sen foolishly. The Indian Parliament also thought they should avoid the Dalai Lama because, although they all respect him, but because then China won't pay money, which is really dumb, because China, they're going to have a communist school there. Whereas the Nalanda has to have a core curriculum of people developing loving kindness characters, along with all their knowledge, because as the Dalai Lama said when he received honorary degree from Columbia, he said to all the trustees, and it was a special convocation. It wasn't in the big graduation because it didn't fit with his schedule. But he said, "I love it. Education is the most important thing in the world, but I'm worried about your Western education because you produce this very clever brain, but you don't make any attention to the good heart.
Yeah.
And a clever brain without the good heart is dangerous." And they'll go, "Oh yeah."
but the interesting thing, Bob, when when I was in medical school, and I was talking about this with you yesterday, I was working with Herbert Benson at Harvard, and I set up a meeting between the Dalai Lama and Benson during the Dalai Lama's first visit to the United States. So because Benson had been reading Alexander David Neal and wanted to know if the heat yoga really existed, where the Tumo yogis, where the advanced practitioners, learned how to generate the inner heat to dry wet sheets in the freezing cold, etc.
Yes.
And we had this meeting, and the Dalai Lama at first said, "Well, I can't talk about it; it's a secret." But then he relented and said, "Well, I guess for skeptics we need to show something, And so we went, and Dr. Benson and myself and Jeffrey Hopkins and a bunch of other researchers went, and we hiked up into the hills and we measured the monks, and yes, they did generate heat. And then after everybody else left, I stayed in Dharamsala and went down every morning with Yeshi Dhonden and sat with him while he analyzed the urine of the early morning patients.
Really?
Yeah. But I had
Did you read up a little on how you look at the urine?
Yeah. I read up a lot on how you feel the pulses and look at the urine and what it all means.
That's so cool.
But I had one private meeting with the Dalai Lama after everybody left, and where I thought I would be asking him about, Buddhist,
Yes.
whatever. And instead he started asking me about what my background and what I had learned in medical school and so on. And then he asked if I would go to the Buddhist School of Dialectics while I was there and talk to the young monks about the scientific curriculum that I had was coming out of, which
and
I
you did that?
which I did, and then after that, shortly thereafter that, he changed, I think, the curriculum of the monks to include a little bit of Western science in there. Yeah,
definitely.
But that was the beginning. Like I was an unwitting instrument of that. Yeah.
That's fabulous.
And there was that beautiful guy, the guy who he got murdered.
What questions did he ask you?
I hardly remember.
Went to do the teaching?
I hardly remember.
Come on.
Like about my father, the kidney doctor, and
you talked about that.
I'm sure I did, and how I wanted to study Buddhism, but had decided to go to medical school so that so I would have a trade. Because I wanted to be a therapist. I was in my last year of medical school, so I was planning to be a therapist with the hope of bringing Buddhist understanding to the practice of therapy.
Did he extend your interview past? Did he extend it? There were nervous secretaries circling, and he said they extended it. He kept asking you a question.
The nervous secretaries weren't there. It was like
that means
March.
He extended it.
Yeah, it was like it was a.
Yeah, it was easier to see him.
It was 1981 or something. It went on for a while, and
yes.
I was going to go. I was going to travel. I asked him for a letter of introduction to, because I was going to see Gelek Rimpoche and the Karmapa. Although he tried to nudge me to go to Dujum Rinpoche, but I was still in this Kaigyu. I had met Kalu already in Cambridge.
Good.
And had been.
He wanted you to see Dujum too.
Yeah, he wanted me.
Dujum was
or Kensei. Maybe it was Kensei Rinpoche.
Dingo Kensei. Both.
I think he was sort of pushing me in that. He looked a little disappointed when I said I wanted to.
No, he wasn't.
He looked a little. He was like, okay, if that's what you want, That's what.
I think he might be. He would not have been disappointed by that. He would want you to see all of them.
Yeah.
Maybe he was disappointed that you weren't staying in Dharamsala.
Maybe.
Because he would have liked to talk to you more.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You saw him only that one time. That's when he was introduced to you, and that was toward the end.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, what you didn't know at the time, is circling in an anteroom if they didn't come in, were people who wanted you the hell out of there because they have a lot of they have Tibetans, they have other things they want them to do. And they're not supposed to let people stay too long. And when he gets someone he really fascinated with, Mike, he was with you, karmically, he keeps wanting to question them. Uh-huh. And so then you were, then they put you on a popularity list if you had stayed, because, when he goes down, I'm just going to stay, keep it. I got on that list early on, I'm telling you, because he'd come in and say, no, bring tea, and stuff. We would talk. He would cancel 3 or 4 appointments, and
really stay with you.
The secretaries would be really pissed off. So that is really amazing. You never told me this.
Do you remember?
Fantastic.
Do you remember how you got him to write the foreword to Thoughts Without a Thinker?
I forgot. What did I do?
I wrote Thoughts Without a Thinker, and my publisher, it was Basic Books. My publisher. My editor was like, can you get the Dalai Lama to write the foreword? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. He's not, why would he, no way. But I said, I'll ask everybody who knows him. I'll do whatever I can do. Because it was after I had come back. It was. So
you did ask me?
So I asked you. We had started teaching together already. It was when did that book come out? 95 or something like that.
Right.
So I asked you.
Well, I'm sure
I asked you, and you said, everybody's asking him. He's way too busy. The attendants aren't going to let him. It's never going to happen. But I'm going to Dharamsala. Let me take the manuscript and I'll lay it at his feet. I'll leave it there with him. And so you did. And I was like, okay. And the book went to press, and nothing had happened, and it wasn't going to have a preface. And then at the last minute, we got a fax from the Dalai Lama.
Really?
Yeah, it came by fax. I still have the fax. It came by fax and he wrote it, or someone in his office wrote it.
No, he tells them what to write.
And it was,
but
3 paragraphs.
If you had told me this story, that I could remind him that he'd seen you this time and you gave a talk at the electrical school, it would have happened quicker.
Well,
it wouldn't have been on a pile or in a list,
I was too
really
shy to.
Well, I am always too, you know. I am very shy. Nobody knows that.
But it made such a difference. You know, like to have that. It was before he had written like 1 million introductions.
That's so great. I'm so happy I was able to help that. I have forgotten that.
You were the person.
I forgot that. You totally deserve it. And if I'd known this story, which is the first time I think you've told me this story, that's really something. Amazing.
So what happened? The guy who was running the School of Dialectics got murdered, though, right? A couple of years later.
Yes, that's Los yes.
Yeah. He was
He and his 2 young acolytes, disciples, were murdered viciously and violently. Have you seen that book that I published?
I think so.
It's called the Dalai Lama and the King Demon.
Yeah. And
it's a whole detective story about how the inspector in Dharamsala became a well-known Indian government inspector by tracking those killers down to Delhi and then to China, actually, of course. And then this is a real disgrace, It's the same people, and one of the people is the same person who are imprisoning the Uyghurs in their camps today.
Yeah.
And who have not allowed any of the later leaders, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and we never thought they would still control Xi Jinping, but they did. And they to behave nicely with the so-called minority nations, meaning the actual colonies. They are not minority. You don't have a minority nation in a nation. Minority nation means a neighbor colony. You know what I mean? And they're so harsh with them, and they're trying to exterminate them. It's just terrible. And that poor guy was killed. You must have had a chat with him. He was a nice guy, right?
Yeah, he was a nice guy. No, he gave
me. He was a very good guy.
Gave me a white scarf and honorary certificate.
Of course. That's
beautiful.
great.
He was a beautiful guy. Yeah,
he was, and it was a real tragedy.
Yeah,
and a really terrible tragedy. Well,
and there was a new doctor who Tenzin Chodrak. He had just come out of 20 years in jail, and
you met him too.
I met him too. Yeah,
wonderful. Jonas was so happy to have him.
Yeah,
because he had been, he and Yeshi Dhonden, the 2 of them, were the 2 foremost disciples of someone called Khenab Norbu, who was the one who tried to start modernizing by communicating with the British embassy, beginning to integrate modern or industrial medicine with their own medicine, and especially helpful in some things like inoculations, plagues, things like that, leprosy. They were beginning to incorporate Western modalities to deal with that, because Tibetan medicine is very open to other systems if they work, but they don't like the dogma of materialism, of course. They were a mind-body medicine, but they were open to that. So Jonas was very happy to have him there, and so was Yeshi Dhonden. They were fellow students.
Yeah.
Then Yeshi Dhonden more retired, who was the one who refounded the medical institute. You must have visited that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And
that's where I was an apprentice there for about a year.
Really? Dr. Benson even got Yeshi Dhonden to come to the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston and to go on rounds with him.
Yes.
And there was Dr. Dhonden. There was one patient where he took her pulse and examined her, and then asked her when she had lost her uterus, and no one in the that was a big source of what her problem was, that the doctors couldn't figure out, and no one in the hospital, none of the doctors had ever taken her history that deeply, so they had missed this whole aspect of. Anyway, so
he was the most amazing diagnostician.
Yeah, he was.
He was the most amazing. He was a little bit attacked by some people. He had a mixed reputation.
Yeah, I know.
But that's false. So I lived there for a long time. He never touched me. Never made any problem with me.
Yep.
he was just a weird person. And he would, people would think he was going on to them, but he wasn't at all. And he was amazing. I have a funny story about it, but I'll tell you another time.
Okay,
you do a podcast on your part, I'll tell you a very funny story about him with some Indian. He was very famous among the military, the Sikh military who were in Pathankot and in Dharamsala area and the camps there, because it's so near the Pakistani border, And he was very famous. You always at the Indian Institute that he was found, the jeeps were pulling up and they were showing up there a lot, because Tibetan medicine has some very powerful aphrodisiacs, and there were, and I can't resist a story. And this one first guy who made him more famous, he was a kind of colonel, and he came in all very, his turban, and he had his English writing up in his boots, and got out of his jeep, and there were flunkies around, and he was like, he spoke Hindi, and Yeshi Dhonden spoke Hindi. So he was starting to talk, and then he kept not really getting to the point, going hem, and Yeshi Dhonden, and then Yeshi said, okay, I think I know, come with me, and then he went behind a curtain, and he brought me, and because I was in shadow in those days, and then behind the curtain, he looked at the guy, and he didn't say anything. He took his hand like this, and he put one finger through this, and he went and made a big smile, and then he went like this. And then the guy goes, yes. Okay, they said, I got just what you need. And he gave him some medicine. And then 4 days later, zoom, it's like more colonels and generals and I don't know what all coming from the Indian Army. And Dr. Dhonden received the Padma Shri Award.
Oh, did he really?
Just a year before he died. That was 3 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, actually, it's so sad. I was in India, but I had booked my flight at the time he was at the palace getting it, and he could have taken me. And he wanted to, but would have cost me $3,000 to not take that booking. And I couldn't do it. It's so sad. So he's one of the very few Tibetans who got that Padma Shri Award.
Really?
Yeah, he did.
Didn't you get that
which
award?
I got. What?
Didn't you just?
Yeah, I got it since then. Yeah, I got it. But I didn't get to the ceremony because of COVID.
Really? I wondered.
It was last April, and it was postponed. But that I can still, and actually in India, I put, if I make a greeting card, I put Padma Shri Robert Thurman, and that's much more important than PhD or whatever.
Yeah, you should explain to the people who are listening what it is, the Padma Shri.
Well, Padma Shri, it's from the President of India, not the Prime Minister, luckily. And it was given to a lot of Muslims also, which I made sure of before I accepted it.
Yeah.
And, people who distinguish Indian people, mostly, who have done something to benefit the Republic of India,
Yeah.
And I got it as a benefit, but one of the few Westerners or outsiders, Japanese Westerners, who have done something beneficial, and they think, and they know I'm working on translating all these books that used to be Indian books in Sanskrit to restore the Indian Buddhist culture.
Nice.
Because the only thing they know about Buddhism is the Pali culture, which purports to connect to Indian colloquial language of Buddha's time, but it's not like any Indian language now. It's not. It's a little bit like Hindi, but so the huge translations into Tibetan of 6,000 of the key books of the great Buddhist university libraries are only existing in Tibetan translation, and I'm working to bring them back.
What happened to them? What happened to them in India?
They were burned by the Muslim invaders who burned the monasteries. They were just all burned to the ground. Really? 9-story giant libraries, thousands. They say the pile of books, I know, so they threw the monks on the pile. But the pile of the books burned for months.
Really?
There were so many books. Yeah. Well, they're like palm leaf. They're like kindling almost. Yeah. And it was such huge pile. 9-story. The big one of Nalanda was known as the Ocean of Jewels, it was called, and it was 9 stories high. And there were all these analysts of the mind in there writing their books, like Mark Epstein, 6, 7, 8, 10 books, Thoughts Without a Thinker, writing their books, and they were collected in that library. Yeah. So then it was lost, maybe 5% still in Sanskrit, and the Chinese only translated sutras. They never translated, and they didn't translate many of them, all of them, but they translated a lot of them. but then they didn't translate tantras much, because only very little bit toward the end, and which are huge literature actually, not just the yogis, but a lot of literature as well, and all the commentaries and the Abhidharma of the Sanskrit Abhidharma, they didn't translate into Chinese, not at all.
And did none of them survive the fires? None of them survived?
Maybe 3, 4, 5%.
Really?
And or they turn up in a Jain library or something, because the Jains survived a little bit, some of their institutions, because the Jains were the money people, because they couldn't plow. They weren't nastily forbidden from having land and farming like the Europeans did to the Jews, but they themselves didn't want to plow and farm because they didn't want to kill insects by plowing. So they became jewelers and money people, and therefore even the new conqueror in India had to borrow money from somebody to have more wars. So the Jains were the Rothschilds of India in the second millennium, and they still are the big jewelers,
So that's why all their temples survived and so on.
Well, no, all their temples didn't survive because they were very rapacious, and they used their anti-idolatry precept as an excuse to melt down the golden images, even Hindu ones. They melted, and then Hinduism had to come back from the villages. They couldn't exterminate all the villages because the villages grew the food, and the Brahmin priests therefore survived in the villages, but they destroyed also there are a lot of Hindu culture they destroyed, and actually this huge Buddhist literature and these huge universities were the Indian Hindu culture. At that time, they were all interwoven. There were no huge Buddhist universities. I mean, Hindu universities. They didn't have even monks, really, around that time, Hindus. Because they have they were celibate students, but then you had to have a family in the Hindu 4 stages of life, So they didn't like lifelong monks. But then after the Buddhist monks were all exterminated, then they started having swamis who were celibate lifelong, and they started to have mats, what they called mats, and they built them all on the ruins of the Buddhist one. Once they were coming back a little bit, recovering. And that's why I got the Padma Shri, because I give speeches there when I go to Delhi, and I explain to them it's not like some alien religion coming from Tibet or from Sri Lanka or from Japan or China. This is your own religion that you exported to all those places, and you now don't remember that. And it's very embedded in your Hinduism. And the Jains, and it reinforces the Jains like 10,000-fold if you really recover this literature in your own notion of your history. And it was the matrix of your melting pot where you didn't have religious battles so much. Because the Buddhist thing is like you don't adopt your conviction in this fanatic way. You have open-minded. Right. And so that's my next 2 decades. If I can obey the Dalai Lama's precept and live to 104, I have to I'm building something in Nagarjunakonda. You must visit.
Oh, I've always wanted to go to Nagarjunakonda.
In Andhra Pradesh. And there, his own town, named after him, is underwater because of a dam.
I know. I saw all the stuff in the British Museum that came from there.
But the mountain he lived on, which is called Glory Mountain, Sri Parvata, where all the Siddhas, because he was a Siddha himself. Don't tell me Siddhas came thousands of years later. Nagarjuna was a Siddha, for sure. He's one of the greatest of the Siddhas. And where he lived is where we have this land, with the kindness of my beloved Priyadarshi friend.
Really?
The Tenzin Priyadarshi, the guy who's heads the Dalai Lama Institution at MIT. He's going to be in the summit where you are in the first day. About transformative values.
So what are you building in Nagarjunakonda?
Well, we're going to build. He wants to build a meditation center. And he's tolerating me as a partner to build a translation center. Called the Dharma Wheel Center.
Really?
And I have this great vision of round tables with big screens in the middle of them. And then with all electronic versions of any translation, Chinese, Sanskrit, Tibetan, whatever, different versions. And then people sitting around this table, and then at least one great Sanskrit pundit, but who knows the Buddhist literature, and some geishas, who know even modern science as well. and people like you who know science themselves, and then linguistic translators, not only into English, although that's the first, we're starting there, into Chinese, to expand their canon, into Russian, into German, into Swahili, into Arabic, into Turkish, Japanese. And then because you can do one act of translating, and then these guys, everybody writes the meaning down in their own language, and it begins to develop concordances and, lists of words, and the right terminologies, so that it becomes consistent, instead of everybody having their own words. And then I will, then I'll die.
Okay, you will have
and
done
I'll be
your work.
reborn.
Yeah.
I'll be reborn, and I'll go study there.
You'll be in the
and I wanted to do it.
Go to the
Did you
Chisita
visit?
heaven.
Did you visit the Central University in Sarnath? You did visit Sarnath, I'm sure.
I went to Sarnath. Yeah, I went
But
to.
I
just remember the stupa and the museum.
I see. So the Central. Well, he already had built what was at that time called the Higher Institute for Higher Buddhist Studies, Tibetan Studies. Samdong Rinpoche had. But then it eventually has become now an Indian government-supported university called Central University of Tibetan Studies, and which I think is also why I got the Padma Shri, because I got an honorary degree from them, a Manjushri degree, Vakpati, and with the Indian Minister of Education. We also got it, and we had to put on this weird Tibetan like hat and graduation robes, and she was Indian and her sari, and she had her hairdo, she had to put it on. It was very complicated. We both were laughing, trying to dress up. So anyway, I'm sorry, shouldn't be talking about that, but that will interface with the new Nalanda University, where you will be the patron saint of the psych department, a clinical psych department, and that there should be a base at Bard, maybe, on the Hudson here, with maybe a branch in Woodstock, of this kind of new core curriculum, which is a Dharma core curriculum, which is not a religious Buddhist curriculum, but it's a reality curriculum. And then there will be that will have a religion department, like we have a little tiny one at Columbia, and then that's where religion will be taught and studied in a pluralistic manner comparatively as religion. But in the core curriculum, they don't have to go there, although they could. So they become unfanatical about their own religion, whoever the students. But then the Dharma thing in the core curriculum is developing the good heart. That's it. Yeah. And the Christianity and Islam and Judaism, and that's all that the great masters of those traditions and founders of them are all trying to do within different social settings where they get at it more or less systematically and effectively. But that's every single one of them is trying to do that.
Well, don't forget to use all the incredible art that was in Nagarjunakonda. A lot of it is in the British Museum. I'm sure you've seen it, but
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so incredible. It brings it all very alive.
It is. Well, of course, the art is, arts and sciences, art, medicine, psychoanalysis is art. Yeah. Not only science. Yeah. Art is really good. Art is science-based. But engineering, medicine, even mediating conflict, which is what lawyers should be doing, instead of generating conflict, they should be mediating and diffusing conflict. That's the real job of lawyers, in fact. It's Gandhi noticed, for example, when he finished law school, and he noticed that the law school people were not saying that, if you know his experiments with truth. I'm sorry, I got going too much.
Not at all, but we probably have to stop soon.
I'm enlisting you in the faculty.
Yes.
Because you know what? It's like Allen Ginsberg. I love Allen Ginsberg in one way. He said, poets are powerful. We don't respect them in our material study, but he did say at one point in one of his poems, the war is over. I declare the war over. Mm-hmm. It was like a few years before it actually did end. But he said it was over, and actually it was already over. So whether George does it, dear beloved George, or whether anybody else does, or the Indian government does it, or the Chinese government does it, when they finally realize they can't live in that sick way. And they can still be communists. They can have a communist party in a multi-party system. There'll be a strong party. Because the ex-communist countries tend to get, they're not really communists. I mean, they don't even have a welfare system. They don't even have a New Deal. They're capitalists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry. So the point is, the doors are open of this new university, and you are most honored, and me too. And we're both unsalaried.
Sounds great, Bob.
But we are members of that. No, from that fact, we have our other livelihood.
I know.
I'm saying, in that faculty, we are unsalaried, but we envision, by your seeing where your deeper observations come from, your quest of your mother, through your mother emptiness, through your, which is mother, let's not make it frightening, your mother openness.
Right.
And your openness to your patient to be able to feel their problems and help become a second brain, a second mind, helping them see the way, but they having to only osmotically do it because they have to see it themselves. That whole thing, that's the foundation of the new psychology.
I'm there with it. I'm there with you. This is a prelude for it. This is a beginning.
So anyway, final words. I see Justin is there. So, and he took off his cap. So that means. So do you have final thoughts that you would like to say?
Well, only
yourself.
Only. It's hard for me to come to terms with being 67 years old. And how many years and decades this has been inspiring me, and
you are
how
so young.
Grateful I am to you for all the ways that we've interacted.
You are tall. Kumara Bhuta. You know what that means?
No, I have no idea.
Manjushri Kumara Bhuta.
I have no idea what that
means.
You
are a Manjushri among the psychoanalysts. And he's called Kumara Bhuta. Kumara means a youthful prince of wisdom.
That's nice.
And ever youthful. And that you are as young as you know, in this case, but no non-conceptually.
Yeah.
By no going through the science, writing the unstruck sound. You are that.
Yeah.
And even you are 60. I'm 80, 67.
I thought you're only 79.
But 80 in Tibetan way of counting, to give Mom the credit of 1 year in the womb, like a lunar year practically in the womb, and so physically that there are these aches and pains, but your mind is completely youthful, totally there, and actually there will be an advance. There will be deeper understandings of some things will also come to you.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
They are, because you're definitely, no question.
And
you also can't, now you remember this core curriculum, you can't die until you're salaried.
Right.
Until it's caught up with the visionary mandala that we built.
That'll be a long time, so...
No, it won't. No. It will not. No. Listen, we need a new normal now. Mm-hmm. This thing will not let up if people run back and pollute the air, and downwind they put filthy tar sands, effluvia down the throat of the people of color, and they don't sell them vegetables in their neighborhoods, and they leave these disgusting junk food people poisoning them. And that cannot go on. And in order for it to change quickly, there has to be a quick recognition of there's need for new curriculum.
Yeah. Well, I'm there with it, Bob. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you for being on my podcast.
What a pleasure.